Okay, so this is not a greenfield video. This is a dated video. So it's May 7th, 2021. And the situation in India with the pandemic has probably reached a whole new threshold for India, but also probably for the world. So this is going to be short. The information in this video probably won't age very well. We'll see. So, as most anybody will know at this point, the situation in India with regards to coronavirus pandemic is pretty apocalyptic, right? And I'm using the term as in the vernacular. Okay, it's sort of the end of their world to some extent. Hospitals are running out of oxygen after they ran out of beds, right? They're running out of oxygen. Nations of the world are sending supplies and oxygen to India as best they can to try and make a difference there. And things have taken another turn. Two things have taken another turn. Indians desperate for health care, basically maybe just oxygen for their family members, have fled to nearby Nepal, with which the nation of India shares a border, and have overwhelmed the Nepalese healthcare system. I mean, there's 30 million Nepalese, there's 1,400 million Indians. So you can imagine how that works out. There are no border controls to speak of between Nepal and India. People cross the border every day, moving freely, and the Nepalese system is now starting to look like the Indian system, meaning it was very easy to overwhelm those people. At the same time that is happening, the nations of the world have begun to restrict air travel into their countries from India, so the Indian people are running out of places to run to. And at the same time that is happening, people in India are becoming frustrated with their inability to get any quality of care at all, meaning life-saving care, and have begun to act out in a violent manner. And when I was looking at the headlines today, there is now evidence of clinics in India, not necessarily the major hospitals, starting with just the local clinics, coming under attack by bereaved relatives whose family members are not being saved, who are dying in the clinic. And there have been enough of these attacks now on clinic workers, doctors and nurses and clinicians and everybody who works there, the security people, everybody, that they have now begun to close the clinics. So when a clinic runs out of oxygen, there was one story where a clinic ran out of oxygen, the doctors and nurses just left. They fled because they were afraid that when the death started to mount, that they would be badly treated. They would be punished, essentially, for not being able to save a relative, a family member. And these are terrible stories, of course, that doctors and nurses, clinicians have to leave these people in the clinic to die unattended because they're so fearful of their own safety and their own lives. Something similar happened in Brazil a few months ago. Jair Bolsonaro, the president of the country, told Brazilians that even though the reports were coming out of Brazil that clinics were full, there were no beds, there was no treatment available, the hospitals were full, the system was breaking. The president of the country, much like our president Trump at the time was doing, got on the media and said, no, that's a lie. There are no problems in Brazilian hospitals. There's lots of beds available in Brazilian hospitals, lots of treatment. If you go to a hospital with a family member and they turn you away at the door saying something silly, like the hospital's full, well, that's a lie. That's what Bolsonaro was telling people in Brazil, that if you go to a hospital and they turn you aside and they say they don't have any beds for you and you have to go home, It's a lie. That's what he told the Brazilian people. And so, not surprisingly, with that kind of misinformation floating around in Brazil, people who thought that they were being lied to, right? Stop the steal, the same kind of just lying to people about what the situation is, when they thought they were in turn being lied to by the doctors saying, we don't have any beds, they rioted in the hospitals. They ransacked the hospitals. Bereaved people ran through the hospitals, taking out their frustrations on the doctors and nurses. They didn't take out their frustrations on the federal government, Bolsonaro, or his health agencies, or ministers, or just like they did here in the US. They didn't take out their frustrations on Donald Trump. Many of them tried to vote him back into a second term in office, even though their family members were dying from this, treatable illness. But they don't care. They don't care. And in India, right now, today, on the 7th of May, people are attacking doctors and nurses. Now, I did a video, I don't know, a month or two ago, kind of walking through what's called a trajectory of how things go badly in India. Now, I don't have it in for the Indian people. I love the Indian people. I've worked with a lot of Indian people. They're very civilized, very gentle people, okay? You'll always do well having Indian friends, neighbors, associates, and colleagues, okay? But one of my predictions was that, as we saw in Brazil, that when the losses start to mount and they don't have any, and they're being lied to by their own government, and they have no recourse, they're going to take it out on the only people they have access to, which is the doctors and the nurses and the clinics right there in front of them. They're right there. Their loved one is dead. The doctor is saying he couldn't save that person, and you're going to turn from your disaster, and you're going to turn to that doctor and your nurse, and you're going to take out your frustrations. That's just how it's going to be. That's how people are, and the situation in India is just horrific. It's just terrible. And people are frightened. They're terrified. They've been brutalized. Okay, they've been brutalized. You can't witness this much death and not be brutalized. Where do you think post-traumatic stress disorder comes from? It's the brutality of the human spirit by too much exposure to death. All right? And the Indian people are being exposed to a lot of death right now. And so when you've been traumatized and you've seen neighbors over here and neighbors over there and across the street and your own family member, and people are sick and people are dying, and there's all these disasters around you and all this terrible news. And then, of course, there's the rumor mill, there's the rumor mongering, it's a hoax, and it was caused by this bunch over here, and these people are getting better treatment than these other people, and it's all a conspiracy. Well, people lose their mind. And pretty soon they're beating up the doctors, they're killing the nurses, they're dragging these people out of their homes. And, so what do you expect to have happen? People aren't going to go to the clinics anymore. Now, the one story I saw was that as soon as the oxygen ran out in this clinic, not even a hospital, just a local clinic, which is apparently the backbone of Indian healthcare, is local clinics. When the oxygen ran out, the doctors and the nurses fled as from a fire. They fled their workplace. Well, they went home. And when family members who came to the clinic to check on their loved one, and then they found no doctors and they found no nurses, the place was empty. And then they went through the rooms and they found dead people. They found dead people. And they didn't find dead people because the doctors left. The doctors left because the people were dying. And why were the people dying? The people were dying because the clinic ran out of oxygen, as all of India is running out of oxygen. And the way you treat respiratory illness caused by coronavirus is by applying oxygen. And sometimes that's the only treatment that's necessary. And sometimes that's the only treatment that makes any sense. Well, if you don't have oxygen, you can't do that. So as soon as they ran out of oxygen and they knew that people were going to die as a consequence, they fled. They can't save them anymore. And it's better not to try.
Okay, good. I'm on the phone with Minnesota. So
Gotta stop.
she wanted me to look at. No, yeah, I'm good. I'm looking for my phone. 1 second, because